Living is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Live it with purpose. Mountains may stand in your way, but you can climb over them. Oceans can be crossed in a ship. Obstacles are simply checkpoints along the way to your destination. Checkpoints that get your attention and move you in the direction of your own choosing. Whether that is towards the ladder of success or the road to discontent, it will be of your own choosing. The question I often ask myself is, did I make the right choices? How can you know if the decisions you make will produce the best outcomes in your life? I faced a transforming moment in my life in 2001. Little did I know that my decisions then would shape my life into what it is today. My personal journey from 2001 to 2018 somewhat mirrors the development of the Bronx during that same time period. It's as if the Bronx and I were somehow connected together in an historical way. Whatever the mechanism is that created this, we may never know. The fact remains that we were both transformed. We both started with shattered dreams and moved forward from there. My journey and the Bronx's journey of transformation continues moving till this very day. What are the secrets of these transformations? That answer is embedded in the story of my life. Anyone can create their own joyous life story. You only need to make the choice to live. The pain of it all. Pain is a key ingredient in the creative process. Creating inherently involves some degree of destruction, uncertainty, or deconstruction. It is an organic reimagining process that produces originality. The end result can be described as a profound transformation of what was. During the fall of 2001 in New York City, a terrorist attack upon the two biggest symbols of America's success, the Twin Towers, were brought crumbling down to earth. The World Trade Center's Twin Towers would be no more. This hostile assault brought death and pain to a stunned city and country. It was a horrifyingly evil act. Meanwhile, just across the Hudson River waters in the Bronx, I was lying prone in a hospital bed, recovering from an earlier assault orchestrated against me. But my attackers weren't terrorists. I was attacked by an overt act perpetrated against me by my own body. From my sickbed, perched high above the dingy streets of a neglected Bronx community, I stood in awe of the sight that was unfolding before me. From my room's panoramic view, I could see this billowing black haze that was made more ominous by my faltering vision. Clouds of debris and particles were sent soaring into the air, like some sort of nuclear dust storm. The huge, dark, smoky cloud mushroomed from one of the Twin Towers. Shortly afterwards, dark, swirling smoke began flowing from the other tower. No one at that time knew exactly what was happening, but it clearly meant trouble. It was clear to me that something terrible was amiss. Later, the news reported that 2 hijacked commercial planes had plowed into these stark metal and glass structures, bringing them tumbling down to earth. I had a bird's eye view of this numbing event as it unfolded, unknowingly witnessing the moment that birthed the war on terror. The Bronx was already engaged in its own war on terror, of sorts. A long-waged battle that saw precious few victories for the home team. To their credit, the community had maintained its vision of hope for a more promising future for their children. So, for many of the Bronx residents, defeat was never an option. Since the early 1990s, the Bronx, which is the 3rd most densely populated county in the USA, has been slowly and methodically crawling forward in search of a new identity. Residents in the South Bronx come from varied cultures, including a mix of Caribbean, Puerto Rican, Dominican, African, African American migrants from the South, and a recent increased influx of Europeans. It is a breeding ground for creativity. This community has been on the cutting edge of innovative art and dance that has become part of global culture. Such examples include salsa, merengue, hip-hop, breakdancing, and graffiti art, to name a few. This cultural stew has been slowly simmering in a pot for decades. Now it is ready to be served. Soup's hot. The Bronx has been the home of notables such as Jennifer Lopez, the actress/singer, as well as an escape for famed writer Edgar Allan Poe. His cottage still stands today in the Bronx. Sonia Sotomayor is the first Hispanic and Latina member of the U.S. Supreme Court. She was born in the Bronx to Puerto Rican-born parents. The Bronx has a rich history of personal success stories. In 2001, for better or for worse, the Bronx became my chosen home. It was indeed ironic that the community I reluctantly moved to was seeking exactly what I needed, a new identity, something necessitated by the traumatizing personal event that had completely robbed me of my former identity. Everything had changed for me in the blink of an eye. The reality is that losing an identity that you really liked is not an easy adjustment. After all, I had grown accustomed to living with it for over the past 48 years. Wearing an identity that I enjoyed was like walking around in a pair of comfortable shoes. What's not to like? Sometimes Lady Luck jumps in and plays a role in our lives. My Lady Luck appeared into my life barely 5 months prior to my misfortunes. She became my Bronx angel. She was determined to nurse me back to the person she knew so intimately before. I could not and would not offer her any resistance. Magic happened, and I sold my home in Brooklyn and moved on up to the Bronx. It was a painfully measured process, recovering to a semblance of my previous state. My personal transformation was much like the metamorphosis of the Bronx itself, slow and methodical. The Bronx has a motto, no sere males, which means literally, yield not to evil things. I adapted that same mantra to fuel my desire to find and redefine myself, grow out of the darkness and blossom in the light. 2001 was dubbed the Year of the Shark. The Leaning Tower of Pisa was still leaning after 11 years of repair to stop it from falling. Timothy McVeigh was executed for the Oklahoma City bombing. I had begun plotting a course to my new beginnings, and just as important, the Bronx wasn't burning any longer. The slumbering Bronx was rubbing the sleep out of its eyes and showing signs of awakening. Its once scarred face had started to benefit from the long process of change. The warlike destructions that were once commonplace to see were showing positive signs of its ongoing makeover. This change was turning the pock-marked patches of barren wastelands that dotted the county into flowery green sanctuaries, lovingly tended to by determined residents. Blossoming little gardens of Eden began appearing amidst the bleak ruins, creating a much-needed retreat from what was, to many, an earthbound hell. Time and perseverance has the power to heal all things. In 2005, 4 years removed from the event, I was still searching for a new identity, and it was still a daunting task. But there had been progress that kept me energized. The Bronx was now bursting of energy and beginning to come into flower. New housing complexes began rising from vacant lots. An affordable housing boom brought in new residents who were sprouting up everywhere like cornstalks in a field. Something wonderful was happening in the Bronx and inside of me. I was becoming more involved artistically in the community. My aim was to produce more theatrical events and video products. I desired to awaken my activism in a way that would make a real difference for people. I finally had a reimagined vision of a new identity. The Bronx was immersed in a hopeful vision of becoming a global attraction. In reality, its weathered and tattered body laid almost silent, residing deep in the valley of the shadows. It was still groggy from years of being on life support, gingerly licking its still open wounds that had left it nearly comatose for decades. Dreams of newborning, as I like to call it, seemed a long shot for the both of us. We were not looking for a rebirth of how things used to be, but desired instead a complete and total change. To aspire to something more profound that was uniquely original and life-affirming. This transformation had to be a permanent and irrevocable emancipation, totally removed from the restraints of our past histories. Creating a newborning template of sorts, no small task to accomplish. The question was, were we up to the challenge? Pushing forward into the arts and activism, I began making strides. The Bronx began making its own strides. Suddenly, the community had begun embracing the richness of its unique beauty, nurturing the never-ending flow of creativity it contained, reinvigorating what was once a maligned neighborhood. Invading former industrial havens like Hunts Point, this collective creative passion was taking over. This spark had ignited a flame that turned into a full-blown wildfire, a growing torch that was scorching our past memories. Memories of a reeling Bronx were fading, burning a new life signature into the bark of this rebounding neighborhood. Artful new paradises were transforming monotonous urban terrain into exciting new landscapes. Bland industrial boondocks that once littered the South Bronx were disappearing and reappearing as new utopias that were emboldened with native graffiti art. Troves of these inspiring Bronx monuments were adorning the mundane faces of long-forgotten walls that once hid the sad reality of what had eroded its very foundation. Now the art of a people had creeped in and began uplifting the bruised and battered facades, making the rough brick and mortar appear soft and human, propelling a determined community forward. Friendly foes. The morning sun kisses the day, making blue skies shimmer. Dark and foreboding clouds silently stalk its familiar prey, patiently awaiting the perfect moment to unleash its rainy attack. The moment arrives. Suddenly, total darkness appears, and storm tries to suffocate its adversary, putting out the sun's healing lights that momentarily alarms the lands below. Some rays begin to break through the darkness in an attempt to regain its position. But waterlogged reinforcements approach from the west to join the battle, building up a formidable barrier blocking the escape of random rays to the lands below. The breaches are now purged, and the real assault begins on the greenery below. The persistent sun makes a daring attempt to engulf the dark masses with a heated glow. But the hostile clouds are a worthy adversary and puffs up its body and unleashes a loud outcry that can be heard from miles away, igniting terror in the minds of innocent children, shooting out dagger-like firebolts that threaten all that stand below. The sun responds with shiny hot sabers that strike back at the wet mist, making a desperate attempt to achieve a breakthrough. History has proven neither adversary's efforts will win the war, both vowing never to surrender. Silently, a friend blows in and addresses their stormy issues, as it separates the two with gentle yet powerful pushes. Finally, they are far apart and the rays can shine anew, lovingly bathing the earth in its warm, healing glow, while a smug and a defiant storm marches on unfazed toward its next destination, all the time knowing that a rematch is in the air. Shiny reflections in the darkness. There's an old saying that goes, "There is always darkness before the storm, but there is calm after the storm." Things are often calm after an upheaval. The Bronx and I were no different. With the calm came healing, with a side order of pain. A time for reflection for both myself and the South Bronx. Reflections that confirmed that things really do happen for a reason. Our mission became to discover and embrace those reasons. Both of us had been infused with a new energy that would propel us both into uncharted territory. Sunday, January 23rd, 2005. Firefighters were killed while battling a blaze in a Bronx building. 6 of them had been forced to jump from the 4th floor. 2 died. It was called Black Sunday.
What to? Chief, we have a fire into the hallway on the floor above. Oh, Mayday! Put my brother in the... Oh, man! Let's do 7 Mayday! Rescue, who's to rescue? Mayday! Go ahead, boys. Go ahead, Mayday. What's your location? You gotta get a hold of the roof before the seal blows down on everybody. Get the hell out of here. Hurry up. Mayday, get a rope to the roof. Rope to the roof. This is 721, line of 59, fast truck, roof on the roof. We got guys out the rear window, okay? Oh, we're losing the top floor, Patty. Mayday, 5-6. Stand down, go. Mayday, firemen down in the rear. 2 firemen down in the rear. 2 firemen down in the rear. In the rear! Yeah, Battalion 17th Division. Go ahead, 17. Have you got a good report from the roof? What's going on in the rear, Patty? Kevin, the whole company just jumped out the rear cages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who jumped in the rear? We need massive EMS here. Massive injuries.
That tragedy reminded me that sometimes in life there are no easy options. But life and circumstances compel you to make a choice anyway. No matter what decision you make, there will always be consequences. I had a quandary in 2005 to either submit to circumstances and become a willing victim, or actively engage in shoring up my foundation and pressing on. I chose the latter. Fulfilling my dream of starting a theatrical production company was my boldest undertaking of 2005. That one simple act paved the way for all that would unfold on my journey from that day forward. Theater was the vehicle from which I could fully flex my creative muscles, because I was no longer able to aggressively pursue my acting career in theater. I began producing theater instead. My muse, of sorts, was Wabi Sabi Productions, Inc., a small Bronx not-for-profit that I gave birth to. Yes, we men can give birth also. Its mission became the motivating force that was the source of all my inspiration. I started producing stage productions with the help of my Bronx angel. United, we attempted to impact the community and its issues through performance. There was only one problem. We had too much month left at the end of the money. Producing theater did not come free. Something or someone had to give at a time when nobody was giving. But we somehow managed, nevertheless. The South Bronx community was dealt a heavy blow when Puerto Rican-born Yolanda Garcia, 53, a Bronx community activist, died in February 2005. She was a community advocate who forced planners and politicians to rethink how they would rebuild a sprawling swath of the Melrose section of the Bronx. She helped found Nos Quedamos, We Stay, a community action group that began in the early 1990s to prevent the eviction of hundreds of people who lived and worked in the neighborhood. These people were incensed by the idea that their reward for enduring years of abandonment, arson, and crime would be eviction. So they began pushing back, breathing fresh air into a suffocating South Bronx neighborhood. Back in the 15 and 1600s, the Bronx was called Ranachaqua by the Siwanoy, a group of Native Americans of the Lenape tribe. Other natives knew the Bronx as Kishkeskek. Today it is simply the Bronx. The news slogan during these times is, "The Bronx is up." In 2006, the New York Times reported that construction cranes had become the borough's new visual metaphor, replacing the window decals of the 1980s in which pictures of potted plants and drawn curtains were placed in the windows of abandoned buildings to give them that lived-in look. I guess their thought process was that it was cheaper to redevelop through art illusion than actually create real affordable living spaces for residents. In May 2007, a former industrial area was transformed into a green oasis. Hunts Point Riverside Park was completed. A 1.72-acre park, which includes a waterfront with floating dock, a small amphitheater, and an area with barbecue grills and tables. There is also a children's play area with water sprays. This was one of the earliest signs that the Bronx was morphing into a warm and friendly family destination. In 2009, with many successful theatrical and live stage productions on my producer's resume, I discovered video. I began using video to explore my Bronx community, its artists, and its people. The video camera became a new tool for my activism. With it, I could create new directions for my artistic endeavors. No longer would the majority of my art activism and creative work be seen only on a local stage. With the advent of new technologies, I was able to expand my reach nationally and globally by using the internet. Suddenly, I was beginning to feel like Popeye after eating a can of spinach. In 2012, a small city rose between expressways in the Bronx. A plot of land that was bordered on two sides by expressways was transformed into affordable housing. These rezoned industrial lots on West Farms Road in the Bronx were the start of something big. What once was a hot dog factory and metal fabricator had turned into a 10-building development. There were 1,325 units of affordable housing and 46,000 square feet of retail space now available for the community to use. This makeover process began to be accelerated all over the Bronx. This was due, in large part, to then-Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg's ambitious new housing marketplace plan. By the year 2014, over 165,000 affordable housing units were built. There was just one little problem. The affordable housing built was not very affordable to most of the current Bronx residents. It was in 2011 when I officially considered myself a filmmaker. I say officially because for my previous years, I had resisted using the title because I thought it was defining me too narrowly. But I was now beginning to fully embrace the art of making movies. I had completed a couple of video documentaries previously, but now was offered the opportunity to work on a national documentary project. I collaborated with a disabled friend of mine out in San Francisco, California, named Leroy Moore Jr. He founded an organization called Crip Hop Nation. It was hip-hop culture, disabled style. As a former Connecticut resident who attended poetry and hip-hop concerts in the Bronx, he is well-versed in the Bronx culture. Leroy, a disabled poet/activist with cerebral palsy, knew the pains of not being accepted in the hip-hop culture. He had been dismissed at many street poetry/rap and breakdancing events in the Bronx, often being laughed at for thinking he could participate with his poetry while standing using his walker. The idea was insane to them, and they regulated him to stand as a lookout for the cops. The reason they gave was that cops don't mess with disabled people. Leroy was born of Black Panther parents, so he always was around activists. When he became older, Leroy took on the issues of the disabled community using his art and organizing skills. Unarmed, disabled people with disabilities were being profiled, assaulted, and shot, murdered by police at an alarming rate across the nation. So he decided to organize disabled artists, activists, and poets to produce a CD mixtape around the issue. He called me up to tell me about it. After the telephone conversation, I suggested that he create a documentary along with the CD so as to have more impact. It had been a dream of his for over a decade. I sort of volunteered to do the documentary with nary a clue as to how me, an amateur filmmaker, would actually accomplish this feat. But I had the foundation for a good start. I am a retired disabled veteran New York City police officer, and I knew that side of the issue quite well. Though I did not believe at the time that police brutality against people with disabilities was a large national or local problem, but I needed to find out for myself. The only way to do it was to do research. The beginning of my research was done on the internet. I went to check out YouTube videos, as everything was being caught on video at that time. A search quickly confirmed that there was indeed a problem. I was in shock. Now I just needed to figure out what to do next. That next turned into trying to raise funds for the project on an internet crowdfunding platform. It was not very successful. I managed to raise only a few $100s of the $15,000 to $20,000 that I estimated needing to do this project. I pressed on anyways, using what little funds I had and could get out of my Bronx Angel's pocketbook. She didn't mind at all. She had an undying faith in me, maybe more than I had in myself at the time. The CD portion of the project was completed in 2012. We could obtain no financial support for the film project. I thought the documentary project would be completed in a year. I was only off by 4 years. The Bronx had become central to my creative activism. I sought to discover what I was destined to become. Hopefully, a better human. Things were changing in the Bronx for the better. We were finally moving on up, and I was right there, caught up in the draft. The upside of being down. Much of the Bronx's transformation mirrors my own life. I came face to face with the horror that I could never have imagined. It reached deep within me and viciously snatched out my unsuspecting soul with the intent of pounding it into submission. In that moment, I had to come to terms with my own mortality. Facing the putrid smell of my own death was a humbling experience. I was forced to reevaluate my purpose for being. As I laid in that hospital bed on that day in 2001 in disbelief, I realized that the reality of my present state was just a tipping point for the long road ahead. My 9/11, my war on terror, my new journey began with the pain of what I imagine people who experience migraine headaches feel. An intense, sharp pain, relentlessly stabbing at my temple and forehead. Sharp pains that feel like a mad dentist is drilling into my gums with no medication. Only, this wasn't a migraine. It was the first signs of my having a stroke. Within the span of minutes on that early Saturday morning in late August, I was robbed of my voice, so I could not cry out for help. My legs were immobilized, so I could not run away. A final attack on my vision, making my world a blur. Thankfully, good fortune intervened. My Bronx angel appeared by my side to speak to me when my lips could not move for me when my legs refused, saw things clearly for me when my own eyes were deceiving me. I felt as if I was in a B-movie or having a bad dream. But this was no dream, and this surely was not a movie I wanted to star in. Laying in that hospital bed, it was difficult to accept the reality of what had happened to me. I was in denial, but it slowly began to sink in. Things that I once held so dearly had been taken away from me in an instant. My spirit was crushed, my identity was shaken. What remained was a feeling as if I woke up in a stranger's body, brandishing a muddled, unfamiliar voice. All that could be heard were unrecognizable vocal utterances. A quiet darkness had fallen over my life. For the first time in an eternity, I could not see a lighted road ahead. I felt abandoned, with nothing to guide me during my darkest hours. Just like the Bronx, I now stood at a crossroads, beat down, confused, and saddled now with an unclear future. I remember with disdain the time I spent recovering in a dreary Bronx nursing home during the winter of 2001. It was worse than prison incarceration. There was no way to escape the awful smell of hopelessness that emanated from the many residents. Every day I was forced to eat this bland diet of seemingly the same exact things. My days were filled with an abundance of monotonous rehabilitation rituals. My entire existence revolved around living behind the dingy white walls of this house of pain. This was what they called rehab. A place that was unwilling to even allow me the joy of having an outside experience with my friends and family. They were hell-bent on keeping me captive in their institution. They simply wanted to suck all the funds they could get from my health insurance policy. They had long-term plans for me. But I didn't have that long-term kind of patience. So feeling sufficiently rehabbed, I contacted my brother to assist me in a breakout. Aided by my brother, I unceremoniously bid them a hasty adieu. Rolling out the front door and into the sunset in my antiquated steel wheelchair. I was overjoyed when I awakened the next day in my new Bronx home with my Bronx angel. I spent most of my time laying in bed, sleeping, and listening to sports talk radio. This activity had become my only real connection to the outside world, besides the many doctor visits. Unable to clearly see the screen of a TV or computer, listening to sports talk radio became my main home activity. Me and my Bronx angel often shared the activity together while laying in bed. One night, I struggled out of bed onto the floor and crawled outside onto the bedroom terrace. I dragged an old sleeping bag with me that I threw around me to keep warm from the winter's cold. I yearned to feel the cold night air on my skin and to see the night sky as best I could. I felt the wind blowing its cold venom right through my sleeping bag, causing my bones to ache. But strangely, that made me feel alive as I wallowed in my self-sponsored pity party. I had crawled out onto the terrace many times before, but somehow, this night was different. It was a clear night, and through my stereo vision, I could see many stars in the sky, probably twice as many as there really were. A thought came to me as I gazed upward to the stars, watching the twinkling of the heavens. The very lights that I was seeing had traveled millions of miles across a cold and barren space just to deliver its story to me personally. A shining message from a star that may or may not exist anymore in the universe, but it still existed for me at that moment. I was the recipient of this private galactic email from a former star that may have exploded into a trillion molecules of dust and gases. Yet it still exists, only now as something completely new. Its remnants now scattered throughout the universe, slowly reforming itself into something new and original. It was the ultimate act of creation. This was the aha moment for me. It meant that the realization of my own quest for a new morning was indeed a possibility. There was hope. I may be shattered, but I still existed. I only needed to reimagine, recreate, and redeliver my new life. The starlight that touched me had done its job. It had awakened me. I knew from that moment on that there would be no need to look back into the darkness ever again. I realized that I was at the beginning of creating my masterpiece of me, a bold new story that was yet unwritten. One thing I know for certain is that there is no stopping me or the Bronx from moving ahead. The end of the ghetto tours. Spirit is the source of all our power that exists. Only by looking the negative in the eye and living with it can we harness that power. Adjusting is the magic potion that transforms negative energy into positive motivating force. Adapted from Marshall Berman's last public lecture at City College in New York City in 2013. In 2014, a popular guided tour of the South Bronx called the Bronx Culture Trail, funded by a grant from the New York City Community Trust, was created. A new identity was beginning to emerge, replacing the old, outdated visuals of the Bronx. The Culture Trail highlighted the former residences of Sonia Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, and Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State. No longer would we have to endure the humiliation of the so-called ghetto tour.
There is a company known as Real Bronx Tours, and they are allegedly gathering foreigners to travel throughout the Bronx and make fun of poor people. Oh, look at that soup kitchen. They go in there with nothing and they come out with a bunch of food, like basically pointing to them, making fun of them, taunting them. The tour also included a drive near a food pantry at a church. Battaglia wondered out loud, I don't know what that line's about, but every Wednesday we see it. We see them go through in with empty carts and we see them come out with carts full.
In defense, the company owners Elena Martinez of City Lore and her partner Bobby Sanabria say they run tours of the Bronx that show the real neighborhood, not the ghetto, as people claim. Company stops offering so-called ghetto tours of the Bronx to foreign tourists after furious residents protest.
This new tour was something far more representative of the emerging New Bronx. I am not what you would call a typical religious person, but I am a very spiritual being. I believe in one God, something much bigger than ourselves. This belief compels me to search for universal truths, to elevate the meaning and purpose of my life for the benefit of all. I sensed myself reaching a plateau in 2014 after years of furious activity. Things were slowing down, but I felt that change was within my grasp. Or was it? With an uncertain future, I still needed to prepare for whatever faced me ahead. I decided to focus most of my energies into the area of film.
Fucking soup!
This had become my weapon of choice. This part of my journey would require a fortification of my position in film. I turned to one of my greatest creations for additional support, my youngest son, Michael. He had been a crucial part of my activism since the age of 10, back in 2001. At the age of 14 in 2005, he became my official photographer at Wabi Sabi Productions, Inc., my new not-for-profit company. We produced lots of work together. By 2016, at age 25, he was realizing his own filmmaking and editing dreams. He started his own production company and called it Tall Tree Productions. I think he named it that because his friends called him Tall Tree. Now he was tall enough to graduate to a bigger role in my journey. Eventually, He would change it to Sir Tree Productions. He liked that better. One thing I discovered was that in order to reach our goals, the Bronx and I had to dream bigger than our past histories. We needed a lot of faith and a lot of luck. It's difficult to remain faithful to a vision that seems so far away. It still seems unreachable after many years of effort. I felt unsure in many ways whether or not my dreams would ever come to fruition. But the fact is, if you work faithfully, you may be a lot closer than you think. Much like a passenger side mirror on a car that reads on the convex mirror, "Objects are closer than they appear." Success may be closer than it appears in your mind. But that is the nature of keeping faith. You never know when your moment of success will come. Faith is that undying belief that what you believe will happen will actually happen. That is the belief that I hold on to, that keeps me going. It gives me strength. Much like the Bronx community, we both have faith. On January 1st, 2015, a 26-year-old man was shot to death in the St. Mary's Park houses in what police said was the first homicide of the year. Rescuers found the man with shots to the head and torso in the lobby of a Westchester Avenue apartment building just before 3 a.m., officials said. He was taken to nearby Lincoln Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. No suspects have been identified and no arrests have been made, police said. That incident made the point that the Bronx still had a ways to go in the community's safety department in 2015. The year had started off with a fatal bang, unfortunately. It was clear that what was needed was a kinder, gentler beginning. But that was the reality. Where was the Bronx's heart and soul? Did it have what it takes to overcome the negativity that was holding it back? I believed it was going to change, because to believe anything otherwise was showing lack of faith. Then it happened. On September 16, 2015, as reported by the WABC News, a major announcement was made involving much of the criminal activity in the Melrose Commons section of the South Bronx. A notorious Bronx gang faced a massive crackdown with the arrest and indictment of over 20 of its alleged members, including the gang's leader. The gang was accused of committing murders, attempting murders, manslaughter, drug sales, and several other crimes. Bronx District Attorney Robert Johnson announced 97 counts of indictment of accused crimes committed during a 5-year period, which ended on August 20th, 2015.
DA Robert Johnson stated, "With these arrests and indictments we have been able to prevent further violence from occurring. This is part of our ongoing drive to combat gun violence and drugs, to make the streets of the Bronx even safer for our deserving hard-working citizens."
The police had arrested 27 members of the gang in the Bronx in an overnight takedown, following a 6-month-long investigation by the NYPD Gang Unit and the Bronx DA Gang's Major Case Bureau. This so-called reign of terror occurred in and around the Melrose section of the Bronx. But this news had an enormous positive impact upon the community. There were also some other positive signs for the Bronx. Overall, crime has plummeted in 2014 with only 95 homicides that year, compared with 653 in 1990. There was even more good news on the housing front. More than 16,000 housing units were under construction, half of them subsidized. The then Mayor Bill de Blasio had plans to create housing, shops, offices, and schools along a stretch of Jerome Avenue, a project that could change the way many New Yorkers viewed the Bronx. Home sales in the Bronx had the largest gains, surging 35% in sales over 12 months. This surge in Bronx home buying in early 2016 was very substantial. The addition of more stops along the Metro North commuter line and the conversion of a 5-acre former armory into the largest indoor U.S. ice skating and Winter Olympic training center are among the biggest investments the Bronx has seen in a decade. The spirit of the Bronx was alive and well. Are we there yet? In 2015, the fruits of my labor were finally beginning to ripen. I was reaching a pinnacle in my activism and art. Full of confidence, experience, and drive, I went into attack mode, determined to focus my art towards our youth's survival, the evils of racism, brutality, poverty, abuse, and the prison industrial complex. Aided by my new partnerships and a new zest, I powered forward. Things were beginning to fall into place for me. My documentary film on police brutality against people with disabilities, entitled Where is Hope? The Art of Murder, had been released. Canopy Educational Streaming Services picked it up to distribute in universities, colleges, and libraries worldwide. It received 3 international film awards. In 2016, I received a grant award for my film work on the project from the Bronx Arts Council. That same year, I was awarded a contract to teach South Bronx seniors about filmmaking. We, the seniors and I, were able to produce a 1-hour-long film entitled Happy. The experience was a blessing for me and the participants as well. Life was good, but it still remained challenging. I am constantly exploring new ways to impact life in the Bronx. I often question whether or not I am doing all that I can do, never satisfied with what I have already done, wondering if I am overlooking anything. Am I truly on a divine path, or am I just ego-tripping? Suddenly, I start second-guessing myself, questioning the truth of my own realities. Doubt was starting to impact my thoughts. Was this newborning thing really what I even wanted? Was it just a delusional concept, a non-attainable dream? If it exists, can it actually be reached? How will I know when I have transformed? I am, the me inside me. I stand alone inside my creation, light years away from my destiny. Yet it is within my grasp. My mind wanders out into the universe that laughingly taunts my insecurities, beckoning me to move forward as it flashes a victorious smile, as if it knows the right path for me to pursue my destiny, daring me to take the challenge. But I hesitate. I forsake it. I detest it. I deny it, all the time being absorbed into its consciousness, piercing my mind with its complexity, exposing me to all that is, as I slowly drift off course to all that is not, unaware of my precarious journey. So I stand alone. I'm sitting here, traveling at the speed of light, going nowhere fast, whizzing past stellar bodies as I watch them whiz by me, connected to a cosmic body, but very much alone, so alone. My molecules ripping apart at the seams, trying to find a universal glue to hold me together. I am trapped inside my own dark creations, searching for the light to heal my fractured soul. The pings of knowledge permeate my brain, yet I have no answers, only questions. More and more questions. I wish I could talk to you for eternity, but I'm too caught up in an illusion, light years away from my destiny, just out of reach of my mind. I had lots of questions, but nary an answer. It was an indescribable feeling. The feeling was eerily similar to something I had felt before. It made me think of those rare times when memories of my past cigarette-smoking years came into my thoughts. It seems like only yesterday that I had kicked the habit. Well, to be honest, it was really me having the stroke that rudely inspired me to rethink my nicotine desires. So I wisely did that. I remember that morning of my stroke. Barely 5 minutes before it happened, I had enjoyed my last puffs of the Newport menthol cancer sticks. 15 years after that last puff, I still have my desirous moments. Moments when I want to escape back to the perceived comfort of inhaling that menthol fresh coolness, sucking the smoke through my nostrils and having it inflate my lungs, then expelling it out by exhaling the smoke through my mouth. There was this sexiness of blowing out a trail of white smoke from pursed lips and re-inhaling it through my nose at the same time. Now, I thought that was cool, re-inhaling secondhand smoke. Then I remembered the stroke that I had survived, the cancer I did not get, and the money I was saving, and those passing urges to suck up smoke again quickly subsided. By 2015, the Bronx was coming into its own. Excited new Virgin residents were flocking to the borough to take advantage of its affordable housing and the new and exciting amenities. The Bronx was in demand again.
The Bronx is on fire, a journal of the New York real estate industry trumpeted in 2015, because the real estate market is heating up. Under the headline, South Bronx Sizzle, the Daily News reported on rising property values in the Bronx's most impoverished quadrant. Once a synonym for urban collapse, the new Bronx was now a hot property.
Even my Bronx angel and I had resolved to stay in the Bronx, where she was born and raised. Everything was changing. My son, Michael, had no great love for the Bronx at age 10, but at age 21, in 2012, even he made the area his permanent home. Years before, he dreaded the weekends when I brought him from Brooklyn to the South Bronx to visit my Bronx angel. He wanted to stay home and play video games. But at age 10, that wasn't happening. Today's Bronx is not your grandfather's Bronx. No, this was a jazzed up version with a bold new look. This Bronx got game. The end stage. It ain't over till you try something new. A person that never made a mistake never tried anything new. Albert Einstein. I have been called many things in my life. Some not so nice. But some observers have labeled me a creativist, someone who is attuned creatively to their surroundings. I'm okay with being called that. I am an activist that expresses my life and points of view through my creative works. My works challenge conventionality. My art is constructed to creatively encourage transformation while also transforming me. A huge part of my work as an artist and activist is to help empower our youth to actively create their environment and their future, to engage them in community concerns, and to be a catalyst for change. Showing them how to utilize their performance skills in ways that will help them overcome their fears, to organically deal with their obstacles, creating new opportunities for themselves. I believe that my art and my activism are inseparable. I create art that needs to be experienced, not explained. Art communicates at the subconscious mind level. A truthful performance of our life's journey is our greatest act. People understand action even when they do not understand the language. My work involves more than just the youth directly. Youth don't exist in a vacuum. There is so much more. There are the man-made systems and environments that need to be addressed that impacts on everyone. So my artistic work is all-encompassing. I search for radical ideas and obtuse approaches in the process of creating my art, searching for truths not yet revealed. My first venture into narrative filmmaking was a comedy/drama web series project entitled Pigs in a Bowl. The main action of the film centered around a Bronx neighborhood during a period where it was changing, mostly due to gentrification, political revolution, fear-mongering, and local terrorism. There was a general state of anxiety and distrust because of heightened tensions and fear. People were being tormented in their own neighborhoods by dark forces, but they kept on fighting, much like the residents of the real Bronx.
At least you can dream, buddy, unlike the dead victims.
True. Well, at least we're not persons of interest, at least not now.
No, I'm not a person of interest. Anyway, I know who did it.
Oh, you do?
Common sense says it was evil demons.
Evil demons? Give me a break. Well, why you say that, Miss Fortune?
Buddy, I know what I know you know. Those pesky demons destroying your business, destroying our community.
If that's true, then there's nothing we can do about it.
You take a stand and fight the power.
It ain't the 60s, Miss Fortune.
It seems to me that there's some place for us here.
If not here, then where?
Buddy, the neighborhood is changing. And in that change, we are not included.
I think you gotta leave up to the future to determine that. But I do know that I'm too old and too tired to be running.
My aching feet are tired of running too.
This is my home. I was here during the good times and during the bad times. And I want to be around when the good times come back again.
Me too. Power to the people.
Many questions remained unanswered. Had I experienced the transformation I had expected? Did I arrive yet? Will I ever arrive? Our rebirths are created from an unearthly act of continuous evolution that continues throughout eternity. Just like the Bronx, growing is eternal. Nos quedamos. We stay.